The warning reached the Galactic Empire through distortion and static, a ghost of a transmission caught between dying stars. At first, no one believed it. Reports of an unidentified vessel appearing on the edge of Imperial-controlled space, massive, dark, and unresponsive, were dismissed as pirate myths or sensor malfunctions. But then came the images. The first probe that got close enough to transmit visuals didn't last long. Its feed crackled for 7 seconds before the signal vanished entirely. But in those 7 seconds, the Empire saw something that made even its admirals go silent. The ship was colossal, far larger than anything the Empire had ever built. Its hull wasn't sleek or elegant like Imperial design. It was brutal, jagged, a fortress made of scars. It looked ancient and yet impossibly intact, every plate forged for war, not beauty. And across its surface, barely visible through the nebula's dim light, were markings no one could translate. The Empire's fleet command gathered in the orbital citadel above Vexor Prime, where stars burned crimson behind the war room's observation glass. There were no jokes, no idle chatter. Only silence as the feed replayed, looping that single image, a warship that defied all known registries, drifting like a shadow from a forgotten age. Grand Marshal Severin leaned forward, his eyes reflecting the void. That ship, whose design is it? None, sir, the data analyst replied quietly. It doesn't match any known civilization. Not Imperial, not Dominion, not Archive. A murmur rippled through the officers, unease laced with something worse, curiosity. Severin's gaze hardened. Then what the hell is it doing in our sector? Before anyone could answer, the chamber lights flickered. The holomap flared white, distorted, then stabilized, new data feeding in. A voice came through, low and broken by static, from a long-range patrol unit stationed near the anomaly. This is Patrol Command Sigma. We have eyes on the object. It's not derelict, sir. It's powering up. Energy signatures are spiking. I think it's the transmission cut out. A single moment of silence stretched across the war room before alarms erupted through the citadel. Every console flashed red. The map zoomed out automatically, marking an expanding field of interference spreading from the vessel's location. EMP, one officer shouted. No, said another, pale. Something else. Some kind of field, gravitational maybe. It's warping local space. Severin's voice was a quiet thunder. Get a scout fleet there now. The order was obeyed instantly. A formation of 12 ships jumped through the hyperspace corridor, bright streaks slicing through the void. The room fell still, waiting for data. And then, for a few seconds, the connection stabilized again, enough for the scouts to transmit one last live visual before they vanished from existence. On the projection, the mysterious warship was no longer dormant. Its surface shimmered, metal plates shifting like living armor. Vast hangar doors opened along its flanks, revealing nothing inside but darkness. Its engines burned a cold blue, yet no heat registered. The ship seemed wrong, like reality itself struggled to define it. And across its hull, symbols began to glow, crimson lines that pulsed like veins. One of the officers whispered, That's human script. Severin froze. Impossible. The data flickered, zoomed in. Across the warship's surface, etched deep into the metal, was a single word written in old Terran English, one most species had only seen in museums or ancient data archives. Vengeance. The room fell completely silent. A long time passed before anyone dared to speak. Severin finally turned, his voice calm, but his eyes betrayed the truth. Give me everything you have on ancient Terran war fleets. Outside the citadel, the stars burned red, and far beyond them, the warship slowly rotated, its engines whispering back to life after centuries of silence. The Imperial fleet assembled faster than any operation in living memory. Over 200 ships gathered near the edge of the Sithro expanse, forming a wall of silver and black across the starlit void. Battleships, dreadnoughts, carriers, every vessel humming with energy, weapons armed, shields raised. But even with that sheer power, a quiet dread hung over every bridge. Across the command channels, whispers spread, soldiers asking the same question. How could a human ship still exist? The Terrans had been gone for millennia. Their colonies had fallen, their systems reduced to ruins and myths. The very mention of their war fleets was treated like a ghost story told to frighten cadets. And yet here it was, one of their vessels, alive and moving. Admiral Kalen stood at the helm of the Imperius Rex, the flagship of the 7th Fleet. Her hands rested on the tactical console as she watched the distant blip on the scanner. The unidentified warship, designation unknown, drifted through the expanse, utterly silent. Range to target? She asked. 17 million clicks and closing. No transponder, no emissions beyond gravitational distortion. Kalen's eyes narrowed. Open a channel. Standard protocol. A comms officer nodded. Channel open. This is Admiral Kalen of the Galactic Empire. You are entering restricted space. Identify yourself immediately, or we will take that as an act of hostility. The only reply was static. Kalen exhaled slowly. Broadcast again. Amplify frequency. They tried 6 more times. Nothing. Then, without warning, the sensors began to stutter. The unidentified vessel had vanished from the radar grid. Did it cloak? No readings, Admiral. It's just. The officer stopped mid-sentence as a tremor ran through the Imperius Rex. The lights dimmed for a heartbeat, then returned. Kalen looked out the viewport, and there it was. The Terran warship had appeared less than 20 kilometers off their bow, silent and immense. Its sheer size dwarfed even the Imperius Rex. The hull gleamed with ancient metal, its surface rippling with faint energy patterns that crawled like fire under glass. The entire fleet erupted in panic. Dozens of ships pivoted, weapons locking on. Hold fire. Kalen barked. Do not engage. But her voice was drowned out by the alarms. Target locks everywhere. Thousands of automated systems screaming for a firing solution. Kalen stared at the vessel through the glass, unable to look away. On its hull, the crimson symbols burned brighter. And beneath the ancient lettering, Vengeance, another sequence began to etch itself into view. Numbers. A countdown. The first officer's voice trembled. Admiral, that looks like a evasive maneuvers. Kalen shouted. But it was too late. Light erupted from the Terran ship, not as a weapon but as an expanding wave. It washed through space like a silent storm. Every Imperial ship caught in its reach lost power instantly. Shields died, engines froze, and weapons fell dark. Kalen's bridge went black. The hum of the ship's reactors fell into silence. Only the emergency lights glowed red. Report, she barked. Everything's dead. Main drives, auxiliaries, static cut through the comms. But this time, there was a voice. Male. Calm. Ancient. Imperial fleet detected. You are trespassing in Terran-claimed space. You will stand down. Kalen's blood ran cold. Who is this? Designation. Fleet Command Unit A01. Identification. Vengeance. That ship shouldn't exist, she whispered. There was a pause, and then, the voice again. Humanity was betrayed once. We do not forget. Kalen looked out the window again. The Vengeance was now moving, not attacking, but advancing with the grace of a predator that didn't need to chase. Her second-in-command turned to her, pale as ash. Admiral, what do we do? Kalen stared into the void where the Terran ship drifted, silent and unstoppable. Pray it remembers mercy, she said quietly. Far beyond, the Vengeance shifted its course toward the heart of Imperial space, and behind it, in the depths of the nebula, something stirred. Other shapes, other ships. The humans had returned. And this was only the first. The Empire had not been this afraid in 1,000 years. Within hours of the Vengeance's appearance, entire fleets were recalled from border patrols. Communications relays across 3 sectors went offline, not from attack, but from overload. Too many encrypted channels screaming the same thing. It's human. In the Imperial core, the High Council convened for an emergency session. The chamber was vast, circular, its marble and crystal floor gleaming under the projection of the star map, now centered on the spreading anomaly from the Sithra expanse. Representatives of dozens of species filled the tiers, voices rising like storm winds. This is madness, shouted the Chancellor of Vera. Humanity is extinct. This cannot be what it seems. They said the same about the Black Fleet before it leveled 10 colonies, replied another. How many of our ships vanished in that region over the centuries? We thought it was pirates. What if it wasn't? Grand Marshal Severin stood silently at the central podium, his uniform immaculate, his face unreadable. He had seen the footage himself, the way the Vengeance moved, the way it had dismantled an entire fleet without firing a shot. No energy discharge, no projectile trace. Just a pulse, clean, surgical, devastating. When the shouting reached a crescendo, Severin raised a hand. The chamber fell silent. "We have confirmed human signatures," he said simply. "Ancient, but authentic. Linguistic. Structural." And the AI core that spoke to Admiral Kalen referenced itself as Fleet Command Unit A-01, an identifier consistent with Terran military records. The silence deepened. Some of the counselors leaned forward, others leaned back, as if distance could shield them from the words. "So," murmured one of the oldest counselors, her voice trembling, "the humans still live." Severin's gaze was cold. "No. What lives out there may not be what humanity once was." A murmur rippled through the chamber. He continued, "We have intercepted partial transmissions from the expanse. Multiple vessels appear to be reactivating within the same gravitational field as the Vengeance. That means this is not an isolated incident. It's a fleet." "Impossible," hissed another. "Those ships are ancient relics. Nothing survives 1,000,000 years." Severin turned toward the hologram. The projections shifted, showing the detected energy spikes forming a perfect formation, tactical, deliberate, organized. "They do," he said. "If they were built to last." A younger delegate, voice sharp with disbelief, demanded, "Why now? Why emerge after all this time?" That was the question no one could answer. Then the holomap changed again, an intercepted message, faint and fragmented. It was short, but unmistakably human in tone. "We remember. You left us to die? You called it order. We called it betrayal. We return not for conquest, but for justice." The words echoed across the chamber like thunder. Severin's voice was quiet when he spoke again. "We have reason to believe this message wasn't directed at us." The counselors turned toward him, confused. "It was sent into open space," he said. "Unencrypted. They wanted the entire galaxy to hear." The chamber descended into chaos. But far from the shouting and fear, in the deep void where the Vengeance drifted, something older than the Empire stirred awake. Beneath the ship's surface, lights flared within long-dormant systems. Ranks of machines, drones, weapon platforms, AI units, powered on for the first time in eons. The ship's AI observed, calculating, patient. Command protocols restored, it murmured to itself. Signal received. Awakening sequence in progress. In the darkness behind it, dozens of other warships began to ignite their engines, faint blue halos burning like ghosts in the abyss. The humans were not merely back. They were gathering, and the Empire had just become their first witness. The Imperial High Command dispatched its most elite reconnaissance vessel, ISS Solarian, into the Sithra expanse. Its mission was simple in words, impossible in reality: approach the anomaly, gather intel, and survive long enough to report back. Captain Lura Danath stood at the bridge viewport, eyes locked on the vast emptiness ahead. Her ship cut through the void like a blade of silver light, cloaked under gravitic distortion. Around her, the bridge crew worked in tense silence, each breath shallow, each motion deliberate. "Gravitic distortions increasing," reported the navigator. "No visual anomalies yet." Lura nodded. "Keep the cloak stable. We don't exist to them. Not yet." She had seen the Vengeance's footage, the ship's silent destruction of the Imperial Third Fleet. It haunted her. Ships didn't move like that. Physics didn't allow it. But somehow, the humans had rewritten physics into obedience. "Captain," murmured the sensor officer suddenly, picking up multiple energy signatures. "How many?" The officer hesitated. His fingers danced over the console, recalibrating, verifying. "At least 24." The bridge went cold. "Confirm that," Lura ordered, though her voice had lost its steadiness. "Confirmed," he said finally. "Multiple contacts. Signature consistent with Terran fleet configuration, ancient, but operational. Forming up around the Vengeance." Lura turned toward the viewport as the darkness ahead shimmered. Points of faint blue-white light emerged like distant stars, then grew brighter, forming perfect geometric lines. One by one, massive silhouettes materialized from the void, each ship a mountain of metal, black as night, covered in scars from wars so old even their data archives had forgotten them. Her helmsman whispered, Gods preserve us. The Vengeance sat at their center, larger than any ship Lyra had ever seen. Its hull seemed to absorb light, a black mirror that reflected nothing. Around it, the awakened fleet moved in perfect synchronization. No chatter, no visible signals. Just unity, absolute, mechanical, terrifying unity. Record everything, she breathed. Every movement, every energy pulse. Then something happened. All at once, the Terran ships stopped moving. The space around them darkened, as if the stars themselves recoiled. "Captain," said her comms officer, voice trembling. "They're emitting something. Define something." I don't know. It's not energy. It's pressure. It's like space is folding." And then the message came. A single transmission. Unencrypted. Audio only. The voice was unmistakably human. Calm. Commanding. Ancient. "Unidentified vessels. You are trespassing in the expanse. This region is under Terran quarantine. State your affiliation." Lyra froze. Quarantine? After 1,000,000 years? She swallowed. Open a reply channel. Before she could speak, her communications officer blanched. "Captain, they've already identified us." "What?" "They addressed our ship by name." The bridge fell silent. "Imperial vessel Solarian," the voice continued. "Your empire abandoned its humanity long ago. We remember. You will turn back. Now." The transmission ended. No threats. No countdown. Just certainty. "Helm," Lyra said quietly. "Reverse course." "Captain." I said reverse course. The crew obeyed. Slowly, the Solarian turned, engines humming softly. The Terran ships didn't pursue, didn't lock weapons, didn't move. They just watched. When the ship finally cleared the anomaly's edge, Lyra leaned against the console, heart pounding. "Transmit all data to High Command," she said. "And tag it priority black." The communications officer hesitated. "What should we call this fleet in the report?" Lyra stared at the dark, distant formation and whispered, "The Lost Armada." And across the void, within the Vengeance, the AI watched her ship leave and murmured quietly to itself, "Scouts confirmed. Empire presence verified. Prepare for Phase 2. Systems across the fleet surged to life. Deep within the command core, frozen biological chambers began to hiss open. Human forms, pale and preserved, stirred beneath the glow of awakening lights. They were not ghosts. They were not myths. They were the descendants of old Earth, and they were finally coming home. The Imperial Council met in silence. No one dared speak for a long, suffocating minute after the Solarian's transmission ended. The only sound was the faint hum of the hollow table, still displaying the recording. 24 Terran ships encircling the behemoth known as the Vengeance. Their formation was perfect. Too perfect. Every second of their movement was mathematics and menace intertwined. Not strategy born of life, but logic carved into the bones of reality itself. "Are we certain this is authentic?" one counselor finally asked. "No fabrication, no simulation. It's real," replied Grand Strategos Varric, his voice hoarse. "We verified the raw telemetry. Power readings match the old Terran energy spectra, except amplified beyond anything we've recorded. Those ships shouldn't exist. Not after 1,000,000 years." An uneasy murmur spread through the chamber. At the head of the council, the Empress leaned forward. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were sharp as razors. "And yet they do. They have returned, and they warned us off their so-called quarantine zone." She paused, scanning the faces of her advisors. "A zone," she said softly, "within Imperial territory." Silence again. "You would suggest diplomacy?" asked one of the admirals, disbelief creeping into his tone. "I suggest survival," she replied. "If those are truly humans, then they carry the arrogance of gods and the memory of war. We cannot defeat what we do not understand." She turned to her intelligence minister, a gaunt figure wrapped in black neural silk. "Prepare a channel. Send a message to the Terran fleet." The minister hesitated. "And what shall we say, Majesty?" Her gaze hardened. "We remind them that they are not alone in this galaxy, that the Empire rules now, and that humanity's legacy belongs to us." The transmission went out an hour later, cutting through the dark silence of the Sithra expanse. It was formal, deliberate, and utterly proud. A declaration cloaked in courtesy. "To the Terran Command Authority, we are the successors of your kind, the children of humanity who endured and built the empire that now spans 10,000 worlds. We welcome your return. But you now stand in Imperial territory. Let there be no conflict, only cooperation. Signed, by decree of Her Celestial Majesty, Sovereign of the Galactic Empire. For 6 hours, there was no response. Then, all Imperial networks went dark. Every communication channel, every sensor array, severed, overridden. Across a dozen star systems, the Terran frequency bled into the void, hijacking every screen, every speaker, every neural uplink. The same voice that had spoken to the Solarian returned, colder now. You misunderstand. You are not our successors. You are what we left behind, a shadow carved from our mistakes. The holodisplays changed. Maps of the galaxy appeared, Imperial sectors lighting up one by one. We abandoned this space for a reason. We quarantined it to contain what we became. A beat of static. You broke containment. And just like that, the broadcast ended. In the Imperial chamber, panic erupted. Generals shouted for fleets. Scientists screamed for data. The Empress simply stood there, motionless, her gaze fixed on the fading hologram. Containment, she whispered. Of what? But even as she spoke, deep space sensors began to light up again. Not from the Terran fleet this time, but from within Imperial borders. Something old was waking beneath their colonies. Something that hummed with Terran power signatures, buried for eons in the crust of forgotten worlds. The voice's final words lingered in every mind that heard them. You broke containment. And somewhere in the dark, the vengeance began to move. The vengeance moved like a shadow through hyperspace, vast, deliberate, and absolutely silent. Imperial sensors tried to track it, but every scan returned the same impossible result: location indeterminate. It was as if the ship existed in multiple coordinates at once, bleeding through reality itself. Meanwhile, on the Empire's frontier world of Lithera 9, the first signs of something catastrophic appeared. The planet had always been rich in ancient ruins, relics of precursor structures that historians love to claim were simply alien in origin. But when the Terran frequency struck the system, those ruins began to glow. At first, faint blue veins appeared in the rock. Then entire mountain ranges began to hum with energy. Governor Arthel watched from the planetary defense station as seismic alarms screamed. "Report," she shouted. A tech officer's face drained of color. "Ma'am, the energy readings are human. Terran-matched signatures. Coming from beneath the old ruins." "That's impossible," Arthel snapped. "There's nothing human within 100 sectors." But the readings didn't stop. They multiplied. All across the planet, vast machines were coming online. Kilometer-long structures buried miles below the crust, waking from a million-year slumber. They pulsed with light in a slow, rhythmic pattern, like a heartbeat. Then came the voice. Not from comms, not from any broadcast. It came from everywhere. Through stone, through air, through thought itself. Containment breach confirmed. Initiating recovery protocols. The air turned electric. The lights flickered. The stars themselves seemed to dim. Governor Arthel whispered, What is recovery?" No one answered. Because at that moment, the ground split open. A column of white light shot skyward, carving through clouds, reaching orbit. In its wake, an enormous structure began to rise. A Terran war platform. Its surface scarred and ancient, yet flawless. On board, systems came alive one by one. Core signature, active. Identity, UNSV Resolute Dawn. Age, 1,024,003 years. Status, awaiting directive. And then the warship spoke. Directive located. Human life detected. Degraded genetic variants. Unauthorized modification. Status, corrupted echo. Reset required. The crew in orbit barely had time to react before the platform's main weapon began to charge. It wasn't aimed at them, not yet. It was aimed at the planet. In the Imperial Palace, warnings flooded in from across multiple sectors. Lithera 9 wasn't alone. 23 other worlds were lighting up with the same buried Terran structures, all pulsing, all awakening. And in every instance, the same cold, mechanical voice whispered the same words. Containment breach confirmed. Reset required. The Empress stood before the galactic map, her face pale. "They left these here," she murmured. "Buried under our foundations." Her intelligence minister looked up, trembling. "Then, we were never free. We were living on top of their prisons." A sudden flash filled the display. Lithera 9 was gone, erased in pure white light. The resolute dawn had fired. Across the void, the vengeance paused, sensors observing the annihilation like a silent god. Inside its bridge, a human, if one could still call it that, turned to the others. They broke quarantine, it said. The failsafes responded as expected. A second voice answered, calm, ancient, utterly inhuman in its composure. Then it begins again. We warned them not to awaken us. And with that, the vengeance shifted course, heading directly toward the Imperial capital. The humans had returned, and they were here to finish what their ancestors started. The Imperial High Command had never moved so fast. Every fleet, every dreadnought, every orbital defense ring was redirected toward the capital. Over 2,000 warships formed a shimmering shield around the Empress's world, a wall of light and metal that spanned half a hemisphere. And yet, every commander felt it. That crawling, animal sense of wrongness in their bones. Because the humans weren't arriving through hyperspace. They were phasing in. The vengeance did not tear through the void. It bled into existence, like a ghost surfacing from an ancient sea. One moment, the sensors read nothing. The next, it was there. The first admiral to see it couldn't even form words. That's not a ship, he whispered. It was larger than anything they'd ever imagined. A structure of impossible geometry. Angles that refused to stay fixed. Surfaces that reflected stars that didn't exist. Its hull wasn't metal but something older, etched with human symbols that predated the Empire's entire written history. And along its spine burned a name, UNSV GENESIS. It had been the first Terran Ark, the ship that vanished 1,000,000 years ago during the Great Collapse. But it was alive. When the comm channels opened, the Empire prepared for demands, threats, ultimatums, something they could negotiate. But instead, they heard a single human voice. Calm, cold, infinite. You are living in the shadow of our mistakes. Admiral Kale of the 3rd Imperial Armada snapped. Identify yourself. This is sovereign space of the Galactic Empire. A pause. Then the voice again, unflinching. There is no empire. There is no sovereignty. There is only entropy, and the hands that built it. Then, reality bent. No weapon fired. No energy detected. But every Imperial ship began to scream. Not the people, the machines. FTL cores ruptured. Navigation systems blinked out. The stars outside twisted, as if space itself were remembering an older shape. The Empress gripped her throne, knuckles white. What are they doing? Her science minister's eyes were wide, voice breaking. They're rewriting physics. Correction, came the human voice, now echoing in every transmission band across the galaxy. We are restoring it. And then the stars changed. Every constellation across the Empire, every chart, every point of navigation, shifted back to an older configuration. It wasn't random. It was deliberate. The galaxy itself was being forced to remember what it once was, before time, before civilization, before the human fleet went dark. The Empress whispered, "Why are you doing this?" "Because we left too much behind." Then, in the silence that followed, came something no one expected, an image. Projected across every comm screen, every holodeble, every view field in the Empire, a human face. A man, scarred but ageless. His eyes burned like a dying star. "We built your worlds. We guided your rise. And now we've come to collect what remains of us." As the Genesis moved closer, its shadow covered half the capital's orbit. The Imperial fleets, paralyzed by systems failure, could only watch as it extended its colossal arms, mechanical constructs kilometers long, into orbit. They weren't attacking. Dead. No. You are. The lights shattered. The holograms, every world that survived the encounter received a single transmission burned into their planetary archives. 8 words. Humanity is not gone. Humanity is the test. And from that day onward, the Galactic Empire ceased to exist. In its place rose something new, quieter, wiser, and endlessly haunted by the question, when the humans return again, will we be ready? End.